I want to start with the economy because that's the story of the day here. And the president's got a pretty major headline to hang out with. Kevin Warsh now tapped to be the next Fed chair. This is one of the issues, one of the two biggest issues he was elected on, Cliff, likely the most important. How are people feeling about it today?
Well, right now, it's the primary issue, the primary concern for people looking towards the midterm. When you ask Americans what they most worry about when thinking about the midterm elections, they talk about affordability. It's a bit inside baseball for the average American when it comes to the Fed pick. But ultimately, from a policy perspective, the Trump and the Trump administration's on target, aligned with what people are worried about. They're worried about making ends meet. They're worried about cost of living. They're worried, as I said before, about affordability. From that standpoint, at a very high level, that's a win. We'll see if actually that has an impact longer term, ultimately on people's voting behavior.
Interesting. Does a headline like this matter? I mean, most people aren't talking about who the next Fed chair is going to be. Let's be honest. I mean, this is Bloomberg, Cliff, and it gets esoteric pretty quickly around here. Is this something that people are talking about? Does it give the president any impact on the voter?
This does not help him in the short term with public opinion in general. Obviously, with elite stakeholders, with decision makers, it's important. With the public opinion, really, it's about its ultimate impact. Am I able to make ends meet at the end of the day? That's what Americans will be worried about. But per my initial point, he is at least aligned with those worries that most Americans have today, which is all about affordability.
Interesting. Let's turn to immigration, because this is, of course, the other major story that has brought us here to this point of having a potential government shutdown. Cliff, looks like that's going to happen tonight. And I realize there's a deal in the works here that will make this a mini shutdown, is what I'm reading and hearing this morning. So with that said, considering what took place in Minneapolis and the step back that we saw from the administration, how much of that was driven by polling data like you're seeing today?
Yeah, ultimately, at least it'll be a shutdown light. It looks like, and obviously the funding of ICE is central to that. I would say the step back and the pause by Trump and the administration is without a doubt a function of public opinion's reaction. Not necessarily polling, because it takes a little bit of time to get the polling out of the field, as well as to see the numbers sort of jump a bit. But it was anticipation of what Americans would say, generally speaking. Americans tend to be really about fundamental fairness, and what they saw on screen and in their reels did not look fair. Now, most specifically, when looking at Trump's numbers, when it comes to immigration, he has lost steam. His handling of immigration policy is at 39%, at least by our poll at Ipsos here. He's had a decline which predates the problems in Minnesota. So he was already losing steam with that. But without a doubt, public opinion, pushback, the administration pause is readjusting. And I think we can chalk that off to where America stands relative to what's been happening in Minnesota.
These are the two stickiest issues in America right now. Will they continue to be through the midterms? This is like 2024 all over again.
Yeah, these are the drivers. It's going to be cost of living or affordability, as everyone's saying today. Can I make ends meet on the one hand? And on the other, it's going to be about who belongs, who is an American, who deserves to be part of Club America and who does not. Ultimately, that issue of immigration and more generally about nativism, favoring native-born over foreign-born, that's the primary cleavage in American politics today. And so, yes, Joe, it's going to be those two issues. It's going to be affordability on the one hand and immigration on the other.
Well, if Republicans are struggling with both, what tailwinds does the GOP have going into midterms?
Well, it doesn't portend, or doesn't portend good tidings for the Republicans in November. The party in power always does worse in the midterms. That's just historically speaking. The historic swing is about 26 seats. That would favor, obviously, the Democrats. They would take back the House. But these headwinds are strong as well. The economy, or the perception of the economy, especially when it comes to affordability, is an anchor. Immigration doesn't help. It creates friction. All those are poor signs ultimately for the Republicans. When you look at the generic ballot, that is, who would you vote for, a Democrat or a Republican?
Yeah.
That's the sort of question we use to gauge in a relative sense the odds of each party winning the House. It really is a blue year.